Hello, my name is Tracy Allen, and I want to welcome you to Cooking with Some Friends. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Some Friends. I have several things laid out. We're going to do kind of a combination of things today. It's kind of a 3-in-1, and we're doing it for a couple of reasons. One, tomorrow we have a family birthday party we're going to go to, and so I wanted to take something that would be good for the kids if they just want to grab something, or the adults for that matter. And then the other reason I wanted to do these is our fall festival is coming up, and so all through September we are doing some carnival type foods. And so today I'm going to show you some fried hand pies, and I'm going to show you 3 different options for those, and you don't have to do all 3 at once. Like I said, I just wanted to give the adults and the kids tomorrow some variety, and they can choose. And so I'm going to show you those, and I'm really doing the fillings for those today, and then I'm going to let those cool and cover them and refrigerate them. And then tomorrow I'm going to go ahead and make the crusts and actually make the hand pies. And so this will be in 2 segments, but I'm going to do a peach hand pie, a cherry hand pie, and an apple hand pie. Got my iced tea going here too. So we're going to start with the peach hand pies. And so what you're going to need for this one, you're going to start out by peeling and dicing and chopping up about a 1/2 inch in size, maybe a little bit bigger, 5 peaches. And then to that, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of sugar, and I'm just going to toss this, and then I want this to set aside to kind of get those juices going. And I'm going to leave this for about an hour to let those go. So it's not a big deal because we'll be doing the other things as well, but I wanted to get that going first. So it could be getting the juice going, and the juices are already starting. These have been really juicy peaches. And if you've watched, I had a segment on my son's peach orchard, or actually fruit orchard, has been going crazy. So we did a bunch of peach recipes, but this is one, and I'm going to just set that aside, and we'll use that in a little bit. Okay. So then I'm going to move on to my apple hand pie recipe, and I'm doing that because I don't want my apples to brown too much while we're doing this. So I have a large frying pan out, and I'm going to take, this is 5 apples, and I like Granny Smith apples, so I've chopped those up into smaller pieces, and I've got 3 tablespoons of butter that I'm going to put in my pan, and I'm going to put this on a medium to a medium high just to get it going. And we can always adjust that heat in a little bit when we need to. So I have 3 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to just cook those apples in that once it melts. And that, I have to cook those apples until they start getting tender. And that could take 15 to 20 minutes. It kind of depends on what type of apple you choose to use. Granny Smiths are a little firmer, so they take a little bit longer. And it also will depend on how much heat you're allowed to do, depending on your stove. I know if you have a gas stove, it cooks differently than electric stoves do. So I'm going to put my apples in my butter, and as they're cooking, I'm going to add a couple other things to these. I want to add some sugar, some brown sugar, and some lemon juice to those. And again, that lemon juice will help to keep them from browning so much. So I have my brown sugar, and that's 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. And I have my 1/2 cup of sugar. And I have my lemon juice. And you can use For this particular recipe, you can use fresh squeezed or you can use bottled, and there's 2 tablespoons of that. Mix together, and then we'll let those cook. You could take these recipes and you could actually make just a whole apple pie with this filling. I would just slice the apples instead of chunking them up if you were going to do a whole apple pie. The same way with the peaches, I would just slice those. And it will, on the peaches, it would depend on the size of your peaches. You might want to add an extra one to it. If you're going to make a 9-inch pie, it would take 6 or maybe even 7 whole peaches. Okay. So I'm going to let those cook until they start getting tender. And when that's done, I'm going to make a slurry to thicken this out of cornstarch and water, but that has to get to the right point first. Okay, and then we're going to do a cherry hand pie. And for that one, I'm using one of my old saucepans because I don't like how cherry stains everything up. I am going to combine my sugar, and I have a half a cup. Half a cup seems to be the magic number when we talk about sugar. My cornstarch for this one, I have 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. I've lost track of what I'm doing here. And I have some water. I have a half a cup of water. And I have some lemon juice. And for this one, again, you can use either bottled or fresh lemon juice, but I have a tablespoon of that. And I want to mix those together, and I'm going to put this overheat as well in my saucepan and bring that up to a simmer after I get it mixed together. And I'm going to let this simmer for a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, and it'll start to thicken. At that point, I'm going to take it off the heat and I can stir my cherries in, and then that one is ready to go. After it cools, I'll cover, put it in a container I can cover, and put it in the refrigerator. Okay. So I'm going to put this one on some heat. Here to the side. My apples are starting to cook a little bit. Okay. And I will come back when I'm ready to add those cherries and when I'm ready to go the next step on my apples. I switched my burners up a little bit just to make this a little bit easier to see. My apples I put on one of my back burners, dropped an apple on the way. But this is the sauce, the beginnings of the sauce for the cherry hand pies. And so I'm going to bring this up to a simmer, which it won't take it very long because it's not a lot of liquid. And then I'm going to let that simmer for 2 to 3 minutes until it starts to thicken up. Take it off the heat and then add my cherries. Now I have 2 cups of dark sweet cherries that I had in my freezer. And I want some of that juice off there. And I went ahead and halved some of them, quartered some of them because they were so large. But you can use fresh peach or fresh cherries if you'd like to. Just pit them and then quarter those up or half those up depending on the size of the cherries. So we're looking for a simmer. And then once it simmers, it'll just take a couple of minutes. The peaches are the last, for the peach hand pies are the last of the Sam's Club peaches that I had. And so I wanted to use those up, and that helped out with these carnival type foods. We decided we would do some different things like pretzel bites or pretzels, that we do corn dogs and chili cheese fries. I'm trying to think, caramel corn, kettle corn, just those things that you normally see at carnivals. I don't know if we will, but we talked about doing, our carnival has, our local Kiwanis has a Kiwanis Shack that they do refreshments and stuff out of, and they do beef burgers out of there. And so I'll either do their beef burgers or I'll do my version of, it's kind of like a sloppy Joe. So we'll have several different carnival foods. I'm trying to think what else we decided on. My son jokingly asked me about doing cotton candy, and I said I think that would be just a little bit beyond being able to cook at home because I don't have a cotton candy machine to spin that sugar. Okay, so we're up to that simmer. So I want this to just go a couple more minutes so that it will thicken up, and it's starting to get a little bit thicker now, and it will continue to as it simmers. The cherry pie hand pies are probably the easiest ones as far as what you have to do for them. You could even use canned cherry pie filling if you want to. For the crust that I'm going to show you when I go to put these together, you can either use the pastry that I show you. You could use the one that we've shared before for the flaky pie crust. You can even use refrigerator dough if you choose to. That's not my normal preference, but hey, if you're making lots of these and you're in a hurry, then I don't see a problem with it. Just you do you. Go what does best for you. Okay, you can see how thick this has gotten. So I'm just going to let it cook for maybe a minute more. And then I'm ready to pour those cherries in and set that aside. Take off the heat. I know some people like to put almond extract in their cherry pies, and you could do that if you want to. I just like to have the pure cherry flavoring. So there we have our cherry pie filling, and so we'll cool this to room temperature, put it in an airtight container, and then put that in the refrigerator for tonight so that tomorrow I can come back and make it into the hand pies. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move my apples back to my front burner, and they're starting to cook nicely. You can see they have a lot of liquid to them. That's why we need to make that slurry here in a little bit to add some thickener to it. So I will come back when those are tender. Okay, my apples are just on the verge of being completely done. They've changed color. The texture is completely different. So now I'm ready to make that slurry. So I have a 1/4 cup of cold water and a tablespoon of cornstarch that I'm going to mix in. And after I get this combined, I'm going to stir this into those apples. And that will be the thickener for our apple pie filling. So I want that to cook just a few minutes. And to thicken up, and it'll thicken up, start to thicken up almost immediately. You just want to cook it a minute or so though to get that cornstarch flavor gone so it is all part of the apple pie filling. And when this is done cooking in these next few minutes, I'm going to put the spices that go in here, and I have cinnamon and nutmeg both. I have a teaspoon of cinnamon and about a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg that as soon as I take this off the heat, I'm going to put that over the top, mix it in, and then this one is ready to set aside, let it come to room temperature. Then I will transfer it to a covered container and refrigerate this one till tomorrow. Okay. Off the heat. We still have a few more minutes before our peach filling is quite ready. So when we come back, that's what we will do. We will finish up our peach filling. Okay, we're finishing up our last filling for our fried hand pies that I will finish up tomorrow. And we're working on the fried peach filling. And I took the peaches, peeled them, pit them, cut them up into pieces, added sugar and brown sugar, which I forgot to mention. And then I let those set for about an hour so the juices could form. Now I'm ready to drain those, and that's what I'm doing right now. I've got them in my colander, draining that juice into my saucepan. Okay. Get as much juice out as I can. I'm going to set these aside, and I'm going to work on this. So in my saucepan, there's the juice that it has the sugars in it. And to that, I'm going to add my cornstarch. And I have 2 tablespoons of cornstarch that I want to whisk in. And I want to whisk in just a touch of cinnamon, about 1/4 of a teaspoon. And then just a pinch of salt. So I'm going to whisk those in so there's no lumps. And this is going to make the sauce that goes in our filling. So I want this to come up to a boil, and once it boils, I want it to boil just to cook a couple more minutes. Make sure I keep stirring and don't let it burn until it thickens. And then all I have to do is take this off the heat, add my other 3 ingredients, and then my peaches, and this is ready to set aside to cool along with the cherry pie filling and the apple pie filling. So we're gonna let this come up to a boil, and then we're gonna let it thicken a little bit, keeping it at a boil. Our sauce that goes on our cherry pie filling is starting to boil. You can see it's starting to thicken, and so we want that to keep cooking like that for just a couple of minutes. And then what I'm going to add into this, I'm going to add the juice of 1/2 of a lemon that I squeezed, a tablespoon of butter, and just a couple of drops of vanilla. And just like the cherry pie, there are some people that like almond extract in their peach pie as well, so you could substitute the vanilla for almond extract if you'd like to. I just like the vanilla flavor better. Okay. So now we've got our sauce is really looking nice. That cooked just a couple more minutes. I'm not sure, other than coconut cream, I'm not sure what my favorite pie is, but hand pies are always so good. Of course, frying them doesn't hurt. You can also bake hand pies, but I like them fried. And then the glaze that goes over the top just helps to add that extra sweetness, and so they're a great carnival type food, make you think of the outdoors and celebrations. And okay, so I'm going to add my juice of 1/2 a lemon, my tablespoon of butter, and just a couple of drops of vanilla. I'm going to put them in my lid because I have a tendency of getting a little carried away when I don't. So once my butter melts and those ingredients are incorporated, I can pull this off the heat and add my peaches in, and then I'll set everything off over with the, see what a nice filling that's made? Over with the apple pie filling and hand pie filling and the cherry hand pie filling. Set that off the heat. Add my peaches in. Oops, dripping on my burner. It's always fun to clean up. And there you have your peach hand pie filling that will cool and put in the fridge overnight, and then come back with it. Good morning and welcome back to Cooking with Some Friends. I took the evening off. I made those pie fillings, hand pie fillings yesterday, and this morning I'm going to make the dough that we will actually make the fried hand pies out of, or into. So I'm starting with 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour that I have in my bowl. And to that, I'm going to add a teaspoon of sugar and a teaspoon of salt. Okay, just want to mix that up. And you can do this in your food processor if you want to, just pulse the ingredients to mix them. I just don't like getting the food processor out if I don't have to. Okay, so to that, I'm going to add 8 tablespoons of cold butter. So that's 1 stick of butter, and I've cut this down the middle and then cut it up in smaller pieces just so it will work in a little bit faster and easier. And I also have 1/3 of a cup of shortening. And in this case, it's Crisco. Get that off my spoon. So I want to cut those in using my pastry blender. And again, you could use your food processor and you would pulse this in as well. Just don't overdo it. You only want to work it until the shortening and the butter are worked in, so it's kind of mealy looking. No bigger pieces of shortening or butter, no bigger than the size of a pea. Okay. We are going to add some water to this once we get this worked in, and the water is better if it works better if it's cold, and you want to add 6 or 7 tablespoons. It just depends on if your dough needs that last tablespoon or not. And like I told you yesterday, you can use the flaky pie crust recipe that I shared on a number of my videos. You can use your favorite pie crust. You can use store purchased packaged pie crust. So I'm ready to work. As you can see, there's real small pieces, but nothing big. Ready to work that water in. So I've measured mine and put it in the bowl. And I'm going to work it in with my pastry blender. Once I get this mixed in and make my dough, I'm going to separate that into 2 separate pieces of dough or discs or whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to wrap that in saran wrap. And then I'm going to refrigerate that for about a half an hour. It's just easier to work with it if it's a little colder. This particular recipe is. So, and when you go to actually make the hand pies, they work a little bit better. They roll out. Now I do, you might be able to see it on my board over here. I got out an old bowl we have. This is a 6-inch bowl. The opening is, so this is what I'm going to use to cut my hand pies, what I use. So I will roll my dough out, and I'll show you this, and then use this to cut the circles that I want. I'll place those on parchment, and once I get several of them done, I'll put those in the fridge while I'm working with the rest of them or making my first hand pies to fry. So it's just kind of an assembly line thing. You can make smaller hand pies if you want to, and you can use like a 4-inch circle, but just know that you're going to be frying them longer and over a longer period of time. It's just going to take longer. And since we did 3 different types of filling, I want that to go a little bit faster. So I'm using a 6-inch and it works great. So that's just what that's over there for. So I will get this into, so I can make it into 2 balls of dough, and then wrap it in saran wrap and put it in the refrigerator. So it's almost there now where I can do that. There's just still a little more dry. Okay. I made that mistake once of not thinking and using my hand to try to get the dough off my pastry blender, and it did not work well. Cut my hand. anytime you're working with pastry dough, you just don't want to overwork it. You want it to hold together, but you don't want to overwork it. It makes that gluten tough. And you don't have to be exact that this is exactly half, because you're going to roll this out and then cut your pie shells from that, or your, okay. So these are ready to go into my saran wrap and put them in the fridge. As you can see, I got my mat out and I rolled out one of the things of dough, and I got my peach filling out. After I cut my circles for my dough, and I decided that this was the 6-inch. This is a 4-inch cup, so I just wanted to show you. You can use pretty much anything. So if you decide you want to go with the smaller hand pies, I wouldn't go much smaller than a 4-inch. But you can do either one. And so then all you have to do, I've got one made, ready to go, and I'm gonna put these in the fridge till I use them. But I'm gonna put in the bigger ones about a tablespoon and a half. And in the smaller one, maybe a heaping teaspoon of my peach filling. Then I wanna take a little bit of water, and I'm gonna wet the outside edges. Now some people will use the egg wash for this part, but I'm only going to use it on the outside of the pie. Okay. This is just to hold a seal, so that water kind of works with the gluten and the flour to make a glue. So then you're gonna fold them over, make sure your filling stays in, and press that down. This is the reason I have this on my piece of parchment instead of my, this one I'm gonna fold over. Keep my filling towards the center and roughly seal. And then I'm going to take a fork, because you want to make sure these are really well sealed so they don't open up when you're frying them. So I'm going to take my fork and I'm going to go all the way around the edge to seal it up nice and good. And there's one of my hand pies. There's a smaller version. And I've seen people that will take their pizza cutter, if they don't like the looks of the rough edges, they'll take their pizza cutter and go around the outside. So there's the next one. Now the only other thing I'm gonna do before I actually fry these, and I'll show you, you'll see it when I do fry them, I'm gonna put a couple of vents in each one with a sharp knife, and that's just so the steam escapes and it cooks all the way through. So I will come back when I show you how to fry these. Okay, so as you can see, I've got some of those cut out. I've got some of them formed, and I've got some cherry, some apple, and some peach going. And I've got my oil heating. Now, you can do this in a frying pan, but you need to have 2 to 3 inches of oil. And none of my pans that I'm willing to do this in, my frying pans, are that deep. So I'm using a small saucepan that we use for heating hot oil and for different things. So anyway, I've got my candy thermometer in there, and you want the temperature of the oil to be about 350, 375, right in there, pretty hot. If you don't have a candy thermometer, you can take a little bit of flour and sprinkle it in your oil to test to see if it's hot enough. If it's hot enough, that flour will actually go to the edges and bubble. If it's not hot enough, it'll just sit there. So that's one way you can test if you don't have a candy or a deep fat fryer thermometer. So I did also make an egg wash to put over this, and the egg wash has 1 egg and a tablespoon of milk. And so you want to brush that over the tops of your pies. So I've got 2 of my smaller hand pies. They're done, they're draining. And I will let those cool, and then I'm gonna put a glaze over the top of them. And the glaze is 1 cup of powdered sugar, a tablespoon or 2 of heavy cream or milk if you have it, either one. A little bit of vanilla, about 1/4 of a teaspoon, then just a pinch of salt. But I wanted to show you, I marked my pies so I could tell which ones, without opening them, which ones were peach, which ones were apple, which ones were cherry. So if somebody doesn't like cherry pie, they wouldn't grab one of those. You can also bake these in a 375-degree oven for about 25 minutes if you don't want to have a true fry pie. But it just gives it a different taste, a different texture to have them fried. It seems like there was something else I wanted to tell you about these, but anyway, your oil will need to come back up to temperature in between the different pies. And you might want to take a couple of spatulas to put these in and remove them from the oil, just so you don't splatter yourself. The smaller pies are definitely easier to deal with, but like I said, it was just going to take us way too long. So my oil's hot enough. I want to drop that one in. I can actually do a couple of the smaller ones at a time. Working with hot oil, you just want to be really careful. So that'll take it 3 or 4 minutes on each side. Then, like I told you before, I'll put them on my cooling rack, let those cool, and then I'll glaze those. And you would do the same thing with the ones out of the oven. You would let them bake, let them cool down on your cooling rack, and then go ahead and glaze them. And you can glaze one side or you can glaze both. It's up to you. So those are 3 different varieties of fry pies. Thanks for joining us for this session of Cooking with Some Friends. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And find us on Facebook at Cooking with Some Friends.